Welcome back, friend.
Welcome back, friend.
Hey, listeners. Hey, viewers. I'm Margot Lindauer. I'm the co-host of Just Us Podcast.
And I am Tashara Halyard. And today's episode is all about appropriateness and how women dress, especially when they are mothers at a big age. So this one might touch a nerve for some folks.
And we're going to investigate lots of different things. This was spurred by something that has gone viral on TikTok.
Yep.
And we'll kind of talk and explain that because I know we have a lot of listeners and viewers who don't watch TikTok, though we have quite a few that do.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, I think there are people who watch TikTok, they just don't know it. They call it Instagram. But literally, things that are on Instagram were on TikTok, weeks prior.
So
I'm just saying.
We're going to dress my mother, dress like my mother, dress like my teenager, talk about what that means and why it's funny and why it's problematic and how we're going to show up in this big age in an era where there are a lot of societal expectations placed on us around how we present ourselves.
Which is very, very important for us to dig into. But before we get started, a quick question to break us into the episode. What is your best party trick, Margot?
Without a doubt, falling asleep at parties.
Yo, this is so true. Like, we'll be teed up, dog, and Margot will be knocked
So here's what I have to say. I find and always have so much comfort in sleeping when my friends are around.
Oh, this makes sense.
And when people are so I am not great at staying up late, though I am getting better. And I can be very engaging and very fun, but I do need a lot of sleep. That said, I also find a lot of comfort in sleeping amid familiar and wonderful sounds, including sounds of partying and people having a great time. So this is not something that I've developed in my 40s, everyone. I did this all through college. All through college. There are pictures of me sleeping at so many parties, in basements and frat parties. I mean, not safe. I don't recommend it, but I had a lot of friends who protected me. And it's my best party trick. I can sleep anywhere.
I'm so tickled that you're like, I hear people having a great time. And instead of engaging, it is spurring me to rest.
I'm like, oh, everyone's having so much fun. Look, they're playing games or they're laughing or they're dancing. I've done what I needed to do here. I'm just going to curl up and...
My favorite part, though, is that we'll be in a full-on conversation and your eyes start drooping and you're literally falling asleep mid-sentence. I love it for you, friend.
Okay, what's yours?
It probably is arriving late and being the best dressed. This is probably my best party trick. That and getting people to drive the boat. Do you know what that is?
No. Is it getting people to pay?
No. It's where you pour liquor in people's mouths.
Oh, I have a story about this in Tashara.
What?
When we were at Tashara's 40th birthday and there was this bartender who kept coming up to her and pouring stuff in her mouth. And I was like, Tashara, do you feel comfortable? Like, do you want this? He didn't ask you. And you were like, Margot, it's fine. We're partying. He's not assaulting me. I'm good. And every time then he got the hint of what was going on. So he'd come up to me and be like, I'm going to go pour a shot of tequila in your friend's mouth. Okay. Like, chill out. I'm like, okay. Cool.
Margot's like, he didn't ask for consent. We don't know this man. Do you need a protective order? Yeah, you was ready to get barred in the Mexican court.
Yeah.
But just like you had friends that protected you when you slept, I need friends to protect me when I'm partying because we know I jump off boats and can't swim.
Yeah.
I do a lot.
No, you do. So here's what I have to say about the arriving late and being best dressed. I remember a couple years ago, you were showing me photos from an event. I don't really know. You were wearing a neon green dress and really high heels.
Okay.
And it was the middle of winter. And there was a photo of you walking into a club. And I asked you, I was like, Tashara, that seems so uncomfortable. How did you manage a night? I think you were wearing one of those purses that you have that don't even hold your phone, like one of these little things. And you were like, oh, I just walked in and then left.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you don't go to stay.
That is all new for me.
Look, no, yeah, I'm blessing you with my presence. I literally will take longer to get dressed than I will stay. Because I don't really want to be around the people. I don't really want to do the thing. Like, I'm a bop when my song comes on, boom, boom, two-step, and we're out.
That's fascinating. The amount of energy getting ready.
Yeah, but I'm the kind of person that needs a lot of external validation. So it's fun.
So I hope we get to this in our conversation later on in this episode, but do you remember, and I don't know if this is a thing for you, did you have going out tops?
What do you mean? Like shirts you only wore like when you were going clubbing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I had a whole closet of just club clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you would like have your going out clothes or your going out top, but you wouldn't wear that top out to dinner.
Oh no, yeah.
So you'd go out to dinner with friends and then go back to your dorm and change and put on your going out top.
But you would keep the same bottom. It was just the top.
Yeah, it was just the bottom. I mean, it was just the top.
Yeah. No, this is very true. I went to a party school for sure.
I didn't, but we managed to do okay.
Good for you.
Yeah. You went to a really big party school.
Yeah, Florida State is, it is research based, known internationally as being one of the top party schools in the entire country.
Okay, well, maybe future podcast episode there.
Got it in.
Okay. I'm excited for this quote. And it's a quote that has to have some foundation.
So this is our segment known as Dumb Shit People Say. This season, we have taken it from Dumb Shit Men Say and expanded it a bit because, dumb shit does not have a gender. And we have a quote from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You want to lead us in?
So recently, as in January 2023, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the new governor of Arkansas, former President Trump employee, banned the term Latinx from state documents. According to an executive order she announced, ethnically insensitive and pejorative language has no place in official documents, she says, or government employee titles. There's some kind of interesting data around the term Latinx and the Spanish language in general, right? So for our viewers and listeners who don't speak Spanish, Spanish is a Romance language. Some of the nouns have O endings, some have A endings. O is typically masculine, A is typically feminine. Plural can both be os or as. And historically, if there was a multi-gendered group, you would defer to the masculine plural. Okay. And so Latinx is a relatively new term, intended to be non-binary and trans-inclusive. And there's other data that we pulled from NPR, but it is based out of the Pew Research Center, that only 23% of Latino adults in the United States have heard of the term Latinx. And only 3% use it or self-identify as Latinx. So I think there's a couple things to talk about here. One is this idea of banning a word, which when we talked about it, we are in agreement that the government should be able to ban certain words, but maybe not all words.
I think what really stands out here to me is that she calls it ethnically insensitive and pejorative, right? We know that the N-word, using certain anti-Semitic slurs, those things are at their core pejorative and were intended and are intended to be and to harm. Latinx, from her own admission, right? We know that it came from likely a group of academics who were looking for ways to be more inclusive, was not meant to be pejorative. And so I think my first issue here is just how it's cast and how it's framed, right? It's very different than banning racial slurs.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you 100%. I think the other piece that is interesting is terms that academics create becoming standard.
Intersectionality is a great example of that, right? Yeah.
So that's another thing to talk about. And then this other thing about the data, which you and I are very data motivated, right? Data is powerful. That's how we're going to move systems and make change. We don't know who the sample was. So are these all Latinos in a certain group who were surveyed, or were they people who identified as non-binary and trans and And so what were the percentage of those individuals who would have preferred having Latinx as an option?
Which definitely has to be considered when we're looking at data and disaggregating it. And I think, however, if we take this just at face value, what I said this morning when we were reviewing the quote was, I don't know that I disagree. If this word is only being seen as useful by a very small percentage of a population, then should it be used in government documents? And we have to say, right, like as attorneys, we get this nuance.
Right.
She can't ban it in larger society. She's banning it in government documents, institutions, talking points, etc.
And the other piece that I think we haven't specifically said, but goes without saying, is I don't think she's motivated by a nuanced analytical framework that we're talking about.
No, absolutely.
She's doing it to motivate her base.
100%.
Right, because this isn't an issue. It's not in government documents.
And so she says, one can no more easily remove gender from Spanish and other Romance languages than one can remove vowels and verbs from English. That's just not fucking true.
Right. We're not talking about vowels and verbs. We're talking about gender. So she's confusing a lot of different things, but I think it is important for us as we have some of these conversations to hold the nuance and know that you and I might not necessarily just be party over everything.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? That this is something that seems like a lot of airtime for maybe something that isn't worth fighting for. And I'm not saying that, but I'm just putting it out there.
Well, let me just say also worth fighting for the people that it is intended to support, right? Because at the end of the day, neither one of us is Latinx. And
neither one of us are non-binary
or trans. And
so who am I or you to say whether Latinx is a term that should be used in documents?
Exactly. And I don't know a lot about Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I don't know who was on her transition team, but I doubt that those voices were included when this decision was made. And if they were, and this was a decision that was made, again, who are we to take umbrage with it? I just think that we have to dig deep into ensuring that those of us on the left are not, as you said, party over everything, because that is the criticism that we so often have of the right. And so how can we have these nuanced conversations?
And are we wasting our energy?
Come on.
For something that might be unjust, sure, but that could be more useful fighting for other things.
Oh, it's kind of like when you're little and your cousin, sister, auntie, somebody is like teasing you and goading you into a fight.
Yes.
And it's up to you.
And so I have this conversation with my daughters all the time. I will say to them, is this worth your energy?
Yeah.
Are we really going to fight about who sits in the right seat of the car?
Exactly.
Because if that's where you want to spend your energy today, okay. But like, let's think about that before we do that.
Before we do it, yeah.
And so this is one of those that I think she's potentially goading us.
So let's see how it shakes out for the fine folks in Arkansas and beyond. I think we've seen in Florida and other states, these don't say gay bills.
Right. I was thinking about that. And this is different than that.
It's different than that, but I also wonder if it's coming from the same outside forces, because a lot of that work is actually being propagated by these, interest groups that are coming into states and saying, here is a package of executive orders and a package of laws.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That is what's happening as far as don't say gay bills specifically. I don't know that to be true about banning the term Latinx, but it's not far-fetched.
And Arkansas is not that far off from Florida.
Exactly.
Geographically.
Right.
And so I imagine that DeSantis and Sarah Huckabee Sanders are talking.
Yeah, they're probably homies. They're on the phone right now talking about their next piece of hateful legislation, for sure.
And shipping people out of their state.
Exactly. All right, my friend. So that is dumb shit people say. Stay tuned for
our next episode.
The next episode.
I think before we get into this concept of dress my mother, dress like my mother, dress like my daughter, the TikToks, the viral spread, I think it would be very useful for you to just set the stage of what we're talking about.
For sure. So you and I had a conversation with the owner of a business that focuses on kind of like style for people in a big age, right? And I remember you all were kind of speaking about making sure that you had clothing that kind of felt appropriate for your age. And my response was, I don't ever feel like I have to dress for my age. And I wonder where this idea comes from, right? So we'd already been kind of kicking back and forth this idea of wanting to explore that, this idea of appropriateness as you age, especially if you are a mother. And then I log onto TikTok one day and I see this video trend, viral videos that are being produced that are all around dressing like my mother. So if you're not familiar, you're not on TikTok, what happens is a woman comes in who is presumably the mother. She's wearing whatever she wears for the day. She kind of, turns around, spins in the camera. She goes away.
But what we should say also is that she's not dressed in any way that would make you pause, right? She looks tired. She's wearing exercise clothes. She's wearing, a boring sweater.
Very true.
I mean, it's very blah.
Very blah. She goes away. She comes back dressed as her daughter. And all of a sudden, the outfit is much bolder, at the very least. In many cases, is showing a lot more skin. It's definitely trendier pieces and items. And now she's smiling, she's happy, and she goes off into the sunset.
It's also usually form-fitting.
Very much so.
Showing off curves. Mm-hmm. And there's a lightness in her step that maybe wasn't there before when she was wearing her matronly clothes.
So it's meant to signify a lot. And let me just say that this is not just about these people who created these very fun and hilarious TikToks. We're not trying to condemn people for having a good time with their children.
No, it's actually I actually think there should be more of it.
Absolutely.
But I think there are things about it that potentially are problematic.
And that's why I sent it to you, because my first thought was, why she got dressed like her daughter to be sexy?
Right. So that was your first. So when you first sent it to me, you said, I don't understand why these mothers feel like the only way that they can be sexy is by dressing like they're 15.
Right.
Right. Because that is problematic. The second part that we both talked about was, why do these mothers fit into their daughter's clothes?
Oh, now that was a thing too.
Why is that something that mothers should aspire to? Right. And why is that even positive?
Well, so we had a conversation this season with a menopause doctor, Dr. Hirsch, and she talked about as we age, there's all this research around how our metabolism slows and why that is, ways I will never be able to repeat because I'm not a medical doctor. But it makes sense that as we age, our bodies change. We naturally gain weight. You talked about the middle in that episode.
And also, there are women, not all women for sure, but many women who've carried pregnancies at some level.
Absolutely.
And some of those who've given birth. And so the bounce back actually makes no sense.
So you have to wonder, in the case of these women and others, is this, of course, what you've been striving for all along? And it goes to our obsession with youth, specifically as it relates to cisgender women only.
Yes. And our obsession with thinness.
Oh, come on. Preach this word.
And that thin and small equates to beautiful and happy.
Thin, small, and dressing in tight clothing.
In a certain way.
Means that, and young, means that you're happy.
And young.
Means that, so what it's saying is you're only happy in your early 20s?
Actually, I think I've never been sadder than I was in my early 20s. So
you couldn't pay me to go back.
You couldn't.
You could not.
So what is that? Right. So I think there's the obvious obsession with youth, right, that we have as a society in general. I think there is this idea of sexiness and sexuality in a certain way in a male gaze that is problematic, but also really prevalent, particularly among young cis hetero women. Right?
Yeah.
And there's something else that I think is actually really troubling. It's this idea that older women or women in big age, particularly mothers, can't be fun or be sexy and be big age and be mothers.
So let's unpack that.
Because we talked about that, and I think it is probably a very different experience if you're not a biological or adopted mother, like you don't have children of your own.
I literally wear what I want, when I want, how I want. I'm not too fussed about showing skin in any way. I'm not too fussed about being in a bikini, and I'm saying this as someone who has thin privilege that I'm very aware of. My body type has pretty much been the same my entire life. And so, yeah, I don't think it ever even crossed my mind that I should dress differently because I was older. I have literally never had that thought.
Yeah, and so that's so interesting. I have, I guess, although I've never really liked kind of showing off my body that way, but I have thought about it more, not necessarily as a mother, but as a professional.
Now, I've definitely been there before.
Right. And I have gotten constructive feedback, particularly early on in my career, that I dressed to whatever and had to kind of tone it down.
To whatever is in what?
I remember my first job out of college. I was a case manager at a nonprofit, and I was wearing this really cute H&M mid-calf jean skirt that was kind of form-fitting and had ruffles on the bottom, but had a slit to here. And my boss told me I had to go home and change.
Is your boss a woman?
Mm-hmm.
Of course. Of course.
Why do you say that?
Well, because you don't got to be a man to advance sexism. Yeah, and I think very much when we talk about like policing how people look, women play a very particular role in that.
Well, I think about the courts. I mean, I remember early on in my career, there were so many female judges who complained about the young attorneys.
I remember when I was preparing for my like mock oral argument my first year. It's something that for folks who don't know, a lot of first year or 1L law students do. You prepare this like fake argument and then you have to present it in quote unquote court. And I remember talking about it in my civil procedure class, and I had a professor who often like went to court. She'd worked for a big law firm, and she said that it was inappropriate for us to wear pants.
Oh, yeah.
That, as a woman,
school.
you only wear like skirt suits. You don't wear pants. And I was like, and I was the only one. And I remember being mortified that I was the only one who said that is problematic. And my classmates were like, what's the big deal? If your client needs it, then you should just wear the fucking skirt. And I was like, did we like teleport back in time?
Where you wore stockings and a skirt?
And a slip? Like, what? What? But yes. And so again, and she was, my professor was a woman. And so yes, I think that when it comes down to these like normative, like these conservative values around dress, I see women being the ones that shepherd it the most often, even in schools with dress codes.
Yeah. So there's also this thing that, I think women in a big age have a lot going on. And taking care of yourself in this way may not be a priority, or may not be an identified priority for whatever reason, either time, no money, your body's changed, you don't want to go shopping, right? There are all these things that could impact why, women in big age wear lots of leggings and sweatshirts.
The LuLaRoe leggings. Absolutely. And here's the thing. as you said, like you've not always felt comfortable showing your body.
No.
And that's fine. That's fine. So I am definitely not making an argument that people need to display their sexiness or their sensuality in a particular way, nor is
No,
that
I didn't take it that
synonymous
way.
with showing skin,
No,
right?
I
But I
didn't-
want our listeners and our viewers to know that.
I didn't take it that way at all. I just meant that I've never really, I mean, except for these few years of going out shirts in college, really kind of ever liked wearing really tight clothes.
Yeah.
For example. But
Yeah.
that's just me.
Well, I think that the question is, how do we interrogate some of these norms that we have adopted?
And I think there's also, yes, and there is, and again, I have not seen all of these TikToks, right? I have only seen some and surveyed the few people in my life who are TikTok experts. But it appears to me that the majority of the mother-daughter duos doing these are typically thin, younger, big age mothers of teenage girls who are very, very small.
Yeah.
I mean, how else would you fit into your daughter's clothes?
Your daughter's clothes. Yeah, for sure. And so I think that the lesson there for me is that you can be a big age. You can define sexy for yourself, however that looks. And if you find yourself dressing in a particular way because you are a mother, because you are an attorney, because you are fill in the blank, then I would really question whether or not that's truly your value system or something that has been projected upon you that you have now adopted.
Yeah, and I would also, I agree with everything Tashara said. I would also investigate how, as you've changed, your style might change.
Yeah, which is totally fine.
So my style is definitely really different than it was 15 years ago, as is my body.
Yeah, I dress markedly better than I did 15 years ago.
Me too. Probably,
Yeah.
I would say 50% because of you.
Oh, thank you, friend. Same. Because I sometimes I send you things that are very questionable and you're like, Tashara, no, you're not wearing that.
And vice versa.
Yeah, we're very transparent with each other about that.
Yeah, vice versa. Okay, so there's also this thing that I didn't know existed that my sister-in-law told me about, which maybe hasn't gone as viral, but I think is super interesting and very, very important to investigate, where there was this trend of mothers dressing like their daughters, but there are also some of daughters dressing like their mothers.
That's cool.
Which I think is also cute and funny.
Yeah.
The other part that we were talking about with Ella last night is, so my daughter Ella, she, her, but does not dress in a gender normative way.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to
I think if
describe
that's, she wears, since she was 2 years old, has only wore blue pants. Now she wears blue pants and black pants and a sports bra and a baseball hat. And that is what she wears every day. If she dresses up, she wears a pantsuit. And she looks amazing. And so we were joking that if we did it, I would have to get a pair of Nike sweatpants and a Nike sports bra, and we would just rotate.
Yeah. Well, because I think when we're talking about that, right, there's this exploration of difference that is really cool, right?
Yes.
Where each of you get to be your own individual, and it's like, okay, reflect my child, reflect my mother in a way that's very fun and engaging. Completely get. I think the dress like my mother trend in the way that we have been seeing it on TikTok is different because it's much more youth driven, and it's about, having a certain sex appeal that is only allowed in your youth.
Yeah. And a freeness. So I think we need to investigate that too. This kind of expectation that we're going to be beleaguered and stressed and worn down, which we are, right? I think everyone is, but the last 5 to 10 years have been a tough time to be here for a lot of people.
Amen.
And if you're caring for children, if you're caring for aging parents, if you're navigating a pandemic, right? There has been a lot of stuff that has made people really tired.
Yeah.
People are sick of being sick, blah, blah, blah. We know it all. But also, we don't have to let that suffocate us.
At all. And we don't have to let parenthood suffocate us. We don't have to let our jobs suffocate us. I think our message here is that we get to be healthy and whole and show up as our best selves.
And we can investigate what that is for us.
Because it is very individual.
And it can change.
Absolutely. I don't know that I'll always want to be on a beach in a bikini.
Probably.
Probably, knowing me. But I may not, right? It may transition to a really sexy one piece with a nice long caftan, give you my best Blanche Devereaux, who, by the way, is my style icon. You never know. And that is okay, too. I'm not doing that. But, you never know.
Right?
Yeah.
You might move from the beach to the hill, right? Because you say you love hiking so
do.
much.
I'm into
so maybe
hiking. I'm into hiking
your
now.
next thing is skiing and snowboarding.
I'm into all the outdoor activities now. It's my new thing.
Maybe whitewater rafting or surfing.
Which I've done 3 times. So how about that?
Really?
I
I
have.
did not know that. Okay, so what I really want to keep talking about is the kind of... I want to keep talking about this idea of how we move away from obsessing over the loss of our youth and move towards what do we want this phase to look like for us, which can be very different, and it might not be how we expected it to be.
There's a really big part of being a big age that I think that, we can't ignore, which is that it forces us to face our mortality in a way that we did not 20 years ago. So that's real. Yeah. And I get how no one wants to obsess and think about their time on this planet that we know of coming to an end. And so if you are, feeling issues or stress or anxiety around that, I get, and I think we want to explore that as well, but that comes from a real place.
For sure.
The other bullshit does not, right? The other bullshit about being youth obsessed, about feeling like, our bodies have to look a certain way, about being obsessed with being thin and showing up in a particular way. All of that shit is societal conditioning and social norms that have been forced upon us. And that's the work that I think needs to be done for us truly to celebrate ourselves at a big age.
Yeah, and when we think, absolutely, and when we think about what our lives were like. So I know we just talked about what our early 20s were like, but a lot of these videos that we are using as the kind of springboard for this conversation are not young women in their 20s. They're young women in their teens, right? And I think about what I had and hadn't experienced as a 16 or 17-year-old.
Yeah.
Right? I hadn't really traveled. I hadn't gone out to eat that much by myself. I couldn't drink. I couldn't drive.
Couldn't vote.
I couldn't vote. I couldn't make decisions about what I was cooking for dinner because I was still part of a family, right? I mean, I could sometimes, but right, a lot of these things were just different because I was a child.
Right.
And so why are we hearkening back to that as the ideal?
Absolutely. Because it's nothing to do with anything that is substantive. It is only about how we look, and women in particular. It's only about being youth driven, not because of anything you just said, because obviously a rationally thinking adult would understand that. But we forego all of that just to look younger. And there's a particular superficiality in that and let me just say this. I believe in doing whatever you want to your body.
And look, I mean, in full transparency, and I've talked about this on the podcast, right? I have had reconstructive surgery because I had a double mastectomy, but I could have chosen to go flat.
Yeah.
Right? So that was a choice that I made. And I do dye my hair.
Yeah.
Right? And we do get our nails done, right? So we're not saying that we don't engage in the beauty industrial complex, right?
Because we certainly do. I mean, if you're watching us, you would, obviously. Right. We can't deny that.
Right. I don't have hairy armpits.
I shave my legs.
That's a choice. And so, again, it's not any one thing, but it's also how are you going to be present in this moment for yourself that holds you?
And again, one that you define for yourself, and questioning, I think, that superficiality that I think is very myopic about a youth-driven society. And I think that's why justice exists, friend.
I do too.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this is going to be a great episode to keep talking about, because I would really like to hear from all of you, people listening and watching, what you do or how you've decided to self-present, or how that's changed
As you
age. Because I know, again, Tashara and I are just a sample size of 2, and we are not reflective of everyone who's listening. So Thank you for sharing in advance. Thank you for talking about this. This is something we'll continue to talk about as we talk about aging and beauty and what that means, and wellness, which, of course, above all else, is the most important thing.
Absolutely, friend. Alrighty, what's one thing you're going to do for yourself today?
I think we're going to get a really good lunch.
Ooh, I can't wait. Yes.
Yeah. What about you?
Same. I'm also in the middle of my 21-day happiness project. And so I need to make sure that I write down my goals for the week. And I did my audit last week. And so I got some improvement to do as far as my happiness is concerned. So I'm looking forward to that.
Drink more water, everyone. Okay. With that, we'll see you next time.
Peace.